So during the film, I'm sitting next to her, and she reaches over and holds my hand, and it's kind of sweet. But then, oh my God, it was more than that. She starts doing this.
What?
Yes, just like what she did. Did you see her do that? Yes, that's what she's doing.
For the listeners,
there's some licking going on of my fingers, okay? And it's like, whoa, I'm thinking...
My fingers.
Hey, Palabo here. Join me in this episode of the Radio Vagabond where I make a new friend. Andrés Thomas tells the story of how he ended up running a guest house in San Lucas Tolimán in Guatemala. This episode was released the first time in September 2021.
Travel is possible at any age. Your sense of adventure is just over the horizon. So, reach out and grab it. This is the Radio Vagabond.
Welcome back to the second half of my day with Andrés at different places around Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. If you haven't heard the first half, maybe you should go back and listen to that before this one. Go ahead, I'll wait right here. Okay, you've done that? Good, let's continue. We are in Panachel in the northern part of the lake. Here we go to lunch as we're waiting for Siobhan, who came a bit later than expected. You can't always count on a timetable here in Guatemala. So when she finally arrived, it was after dark, and the last regular lancha boat had already left. But Andrés managed to call someone to come and pick us up in Pana and take us across the lake back to San Lucas Tolimán. As we're sitting on the pier waiting for the boat, we ask Andrés how he ended up running an Airbnb here in Guatemala.
It all begins in 1987 when I went for the first time to Honduras at the invitation of Father Roy Bourgeois, who is a Maryknoll priest who very much was critical, and not only critical, but putting his life on the line around U.S. policy towards Central America. And he invited a group of us to go to the U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, to do a protest, to actually pour blood on the U.S. Embassy because bloody policies were causing the shedding of blood because of the U.S. wars in Central America. And so we did that, and he asked me to be the support person because I spoke Spanish, and I was the contact for the human rights community, for the media, and for the families of the people blocking the U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa in February of 1987. I was, 26 years old.
And a rebel.
And so my cousin had been killed 2 years earlier by the U.S.-funded Contras in Nicaragua. And so I was quite critical of U.S. policy because they had tortured my uncle while he was a political prisoner, as well as my aunt under the dictatorship in Uruguay. And then my uncle was freed finally after 8 years. Before he was able even to see his son, 3 months after he was freed, his son was killed by the Contras, the Ronald Reagan freedom fighters fighting against the revolution in Nicaragua. Anyway, my cousin volunteered for the coffee brigades and then later decided to defend the revolution, and he was killed. Then what happened was that after this experience in Honduras, when they were being deported, because there were 8 of them and I was the support person, I followed them to the airport and was able to join the Human Rights Committee in saying goodbye to these U.S. folks who spent the night in front of the embassy blocking the entrance and doing creative nonviolence to express dissatisfaction, to say the least, with U.S. policy in Central America. And so they were deported and they were taken on a plane, and on the plane they were able to communicate with us by putting the shutters up and down and signaling to us, yes, we are here and we know that we did what you want us to do. Yeah. I was, of course, it was one of the most incredible, elated, blissful moments of my life because I couldn't believe that it had gone so well. That was my first trip to Honduras, and it turns out that a woman who was part of the group of Women for Peace that came to the airport saw me from a distance, but we never met. And then we never met until the next year in November when, after I'd actually organized 20 people to do another similar creative action. This time we went to not only the U.S. Embassy in Honduras, but the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala, a country you may have heard about before, the largest U.S. military base in the region. And we did a blockade of that. on the eve of Central American Independence Day, and we put an ad in the paper saying, there is a need for a declaration of new independence from the United States influence in the region. Anyway, at that time, I was not supposed to be caught, but I was, and I was deported with the group as well. That was in September of 1988, and then I was back in the States, and in November of 1988, I went to a talk by my friend Zenaida Velázquez, an amazing Honduran woman whose brother had disappeared, and the country of Honduras was charged with the crime of disappearance. And actually, it's the first case in jurisprudence in all the Americas where a country was found guilty of the crime of disappearance for her brother. So she was giving a talk in the Mott House on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., where I was working as a seminar designer on national and international affairs. And at the talk, then, at the end of the talk, came this woman from Honduras, and her name is Narda. And Zenaida introduced us, and we became friends. We were friends for the next 3 years. And then I was visiting her one weekend, and I called her up from El Salvador and said, hey, I'm coming over. She said, yeah, come on over, stay. So we had a wonderful weekend. The first night we went dancing till 2 a.m, and the next day we had a great time. And it wasn't till the next day, on Sunday, when she... during the movie, her son and his cousins go out to the front of the theater. It was full, and we were in the aisle, and we were watching this movie called "Not Without My Daughter," which is an interesting symbol. You know this film? Yeah. Sally Field, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Sally Field.
It goes to Saudi Arabia or somewhere like that.
One of the Arab countries.
Yeah.
Married to an Arab man.
Yeah.
And then he says, okay, we're staying here. And she goes, no, we're not. And she goes, well, you must leave. And she says,
not without my daughter.
Thank you. So then it's the story of how she escapes the country. Anyway, it worships the United States for being this country of freedom. All that. Anyway, whatever. So during the film, I'm sitting next to her, and she reaches over and holds my hand, and it's kind of sweet. But then, oh my God, it was more than that. She starts doing this.
What?
Yes, just like what she did. Did you see her do that? Yeah, that's what she's doing.
For the listeners,
there's some licking going on of my fingers, okay? And it's like, whoa! I'm thinking,
my fingers.
let's say our fingers, okay? Because Katsik did some licking as well. Anyway, so then, the movie ends, and like really, cozying up. We're doing some hygge.
Yeah.
You must learn this word hygge. You'll learn about it later.
Yes, I mean the Danish word.
Yes. Very weird.
he's got the
I
book.
had a hygge party.
Ooh!
In Dallas.
Wow. Anyway, so some major hygge is going on in the theater, but then the movie ends and it's like, oh, no, she like separates me because her son and cousins are coming, and it's like nothing
lights
happened.
get turned
The
on.
lights get turned on, and it's like, what just happened, So we go out in the parking lot, and all she's talking about in the parking lot while the kids are doing video games is work. And I'm thinking, what? It's like, come on, lady. It's like, what just happened? And why are you just talking about work? Whatever. I mean, I'm thinking, what's going on? This is not the first time I was thinking it that weekend. So then finally that night, her son goes to bed, and she's making papaya smoothie in the kitchen, and I come and I sort of caress her hair, and then the sparks just went fireworks, and then we just had a very passionate, wonderful time. And she was with her son sitting, and we were at a party, and they're playing guitar and everything. She's sitting with her son on the windowsill, and he goes away, and I come by, said to her, I put my arm around her just like this, and I sort of have my hand on her shoulder, and then that's it. And then the day goes on, it was great. And then, oh well, whatever, Well, then that night or whenever, we're sort of being very nookie-ish, shall we say. He learned a new word. Canoodling. Yes, we're kanookie noodling. So there's some nookie going on with the canoodling. So yeah. So in full nookiness and canoodling, she says, Andrés, now you got the foreshadowing. Now you're getting the story, right? Andrés, we could have had Friday. We could have had Saturday. I said, nada. If it was up to me, it's like, what's up? You're the one who... And she said, well, I never felt the current. I never felt the spark with you. And I said, well, then when did you feel it? You know when she felt it? Not when we were dancing till 2 a.m, not when I grabbed her hand as we're walking to her house, and not when she came into the guest room where I was staying in her house. That night when we had danced till 2 a.m, and I thought, ooh. And she came in, she gave me a kiss on the cheek, And she said, good night, I'll see you tomorrow. I said, what? Ah, oh well, what can you do? And you came over and put your arm around me and caressed my neck with your hand. And I said, then I felt the current. I said, not that. I wasn't sending any current then. And she goes, that's when I felt it. So it's like sometimes intention needs to get out of the way, right? So then, we had 3-year-long friendship, and then we had a 3-year-long distance relationship, which was just exquisite. And then I moved to Honduras, and we lived together for a year. And then reality sets in, and it's like living together is a different thing than being in love. So I moved out.
The ultimate destination for armchair travelers who are looking for inspiration to get out into the real world and let loose their wanderlust. This is the Radio Vagabond. Gotta keep moving.
We always knew that the love was real, and we were always there for each other. And for the next 9 years, we had this beautiful, loving relationship. Sometimes we were lovers, and sometimes we weren't. Sometimes I came to her house once, and she said, Andrés, you're not thinking of spending the night here tonight, right? And I said, no, of course not. Of course not. Why would it have ever crossed my mind, And of course she had her boyfriend over, and it's like, okay, whatever, But it's like, that's what we had. That's sort of that's the way it was. And but we always knew that what the love that we had was just so real. When she had open heart surgery, she came and lived with me, and I accompanied her for a month. And when my mother died, she flew from Honduras to be with me. So anyway, so we were always with each other like family. And then of course, she's writing to her community, and she says, Andrés and I are making plans to go to Iceland because my son is about to have a baby, and we're going to be there for the birth and everything, and the baptism and all of that. And then she sends this to her inner circle, and I get it, of course. And in the letter, she says, "Oh, Andrés, you know how he is. He is loco, vagabundo y desordenado." Okay, that means Andrés is loco, a little crazy, loco. Vagabundo.
He's a crazy vagabond?
Yes.
Okay.
Y desordenado. Order. Disorder.
Oh.
Yes, disorderly.
You should get the domain.
Loco, vagabundo y desordenado. I love it. .com. Oh my God. So then, she says this to the whole community, and then she says something, and she says, "Oh, but Andrés' girlfriend." And I said, "Nada. If I ever had a girlfriend, and I did from time to time, I always told her, but I didn't have one." And it's like, why is she saying that? And she hey, ahí está, compañero, ya llegó, el que está llegando, o nos está esperando. Okay.
Is that our boat?
I think that's our boat. Let's the story is to be continued. Pero es meme.
Yeah, we never got to the question how he ended up here. That was the question.
It's coming. It's coming. It's a long answer.
Yeah, that's coming up after the break. Stay with us.
And then we paused the story because our boat arrived to take us back to San Lucas Tolimán and the Airbnb that Andrés runs.
You are listening to the Radio Vagabond.
Hey, he's a good storyteller. He should write books.
Yes, he should write the story that's been writing him.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels around the world. Hotels25.com.
The Radio Vagabond. Gotta keep moving.
If you like this podcast, I'm sure you will love a podcast called Far From Home. It's produced by a long-time radio producer, Scott Gurian. He travels around the world to some extreme, faraway places.
There was a single fluorescent light bulb hanging in the center of the room, which gave everything a cold and clinical look. Hardly the comforting atmosphere you would hope for an experience like this. After his song ended, Lucho gave the bottle of ayahuasca a final shake, and then offered me some.
A ver, vamos a empezar, Scott.
Solo quiero un poquito.
Yeah.
Just a little, I reminded him. Okay. He poured out about an ounce of it into his wooden cup. I held it up to my nose. Smells strong. Okay, here we go. Extremely bitter. Ugh. Okay.
Far from home.
If travel is your passion and you want escapism while still upholding your work and family responsibilities, you can travel vicariously from the comfort of your own home. This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
He calls the place Kachik, named after his wonderful dog, Kachik. She used to be a street dog that found out that she would get a lot of love and attention and very good food with Andrés. You can take the street dog out of the street, but you can't really take the street out of the dog. So she still runs around San Lucas Tolimán on her own, and it seems like everyone in town and around the lake knows her. She's with us on the day trip, and every time we take a walk around town, and she's rarely on a leash. One day when we were walking, a friend of Andrés was driving by and rolled down the window to say hi. And Kachik knows her too, so she jumped through the window of the car and onto the lap of the driver. And she's not a small dog. Anyway, we headed back to San Lucas Tolimán, and in the guest house is also another guest. Her name is Alexa, and she's lived here for a month more than once. There's a lot of hygge here. It's the Danish word for coziness, famous around the world, and Andrés knows about this. He's even got a book about Danish hygge on his shelves. And together, in the living room, the fireplace, with a lot of hygge and a glass of wine, we sat down to continue the story of how Andrés ended up running a guest house here in Guatemala.
We asked him a simple question. How did you end up having this place, Kachik, here in Guatemala? And then he spoke for 10, 12, 15 minutes about adventures in Honduras. And that's when we were called out to the boat. And after a noisy boat ride with a lot of music and the engine, we're now back at Kachik, and we have a fireplace going. We have nice wine in the glass. So, Andrés, we need to pick it up from where we left off. We were in Honduras still, but about to leave, I guess.
We were, because I gave a little background on meeting mi compañera de vida, my lifelong companion. And we were together for 13 years, and I accompanied her during her open heart surgery, and then she recovered well, but then a year later, after that, she passed away, and that really broke my heart. Yeah, and so, but before that, Narda, my compañera de vida, introduced me to a dear, dear friend who I've known for 25, nearly 30 years, and that's Chati. And Chati lives right here in town. And you saw her briefly yesterday, or was it the day before, when Kachik jumped into her window on the door?
Oh, that was her.
That's Chati. Yeah, that's Chati. Chati stopped to see me and say hello as she was in her car with her niece, and the driver's window is open. Kachik jumps through and completely terrifies Chati, but Chati is non-pulsed. But her niece had an anxiety attack, which is very sad as a result of that. But anyway, I got Kachik out of there. But Chati, I was introduced by Narda, and Chati has been family for 25 years or so. And Chati moved here to San Lucas Tolimán about 11 years ago, roughly, to become the administrator of the most posh hotel in town, Hotel Tolimán. And so I have visited her from time to time over the years, but mostly 2 years ago, beginning right at this time, I came here with someone that Shaban has met, who is my goddaughter. Erika and I came here to San Lucas Tolimán to spend 2 months writing. And we wrote, I wrote this story that's writing me, and this year is the birth of the pre-launch during the next blue moon, and the full launch is during the anniversary of the last blood blue moon, which is also the pre-anniversary of the next blood blue moon. The 7th pre-anniversary is coming up in December. That's when the full launch is. More on that later. But basically, I did that writing, and Erika completed her book of poetry, which is called El Poemario del Colibrí, which is the hummingbird poems. And there's a mural, one of the many murals in San Lucas Tolimán is the cover of her book, and we'll see that mural sometime. Anyway, so I started to fall in love with this town during those 2 months, and then Erika went back to Texas. I left Guatemala, went back to California, but I was visiting here in January of last year. And during that time, Chati said, "Hey, I'm needing to look for housing because the owner is kicking me out, and so we're looking at several options, and there's one I'm going to go see today. Do you want to come?" I said, "Sure, why not?" I wasn't looking for housing. The short answer, in spite of the fact that it's been a very long answer, the short answer from here on out is that you are sitting in the home that I visited with Chati, and I wasn't even looking for housing, and she was. And she came here, and I came here, and the place was in shambles, and I didn't even think about it. And she basically then told me that she decided 100% she's not taking the house, and then I wasn't thinking of taking it. And then she basically told me about the owner, and that an arrangement could be basically agreed upon to fix up the house. And then we eventually came to this accord. I am investing in this house in terms of putting many thousands of dollars to fix it up, which is what it required, and building. There are 5 bedrooms in the house. There are now 3 bedrooms outside that have been built, and there's a 4th one coming, and there will be more in the future, because hopefully this was all initiated pre-COVID, right before COVID began, and it's not the best time to start I wouldn't advise anyone listening to me to begin a guest house right before a global pandemic. Don't do it.
So when the next global pandemic comes, dear listeners, do not do what Andrés did.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm so glad we're able to give them that advice, and we're going to save them a lot of hassle and money and time. Anyway, so basically, that's how this house dropped into my lap. And then it didn't even have a name. And when I moved in and we started fixing it up, and many teams of work crews, Alexa is familiar and you've already become familiar. 3 days ago we had, about 15 workers here, just 3 days ago, pouring concrete in this new room that's coming up, as well as carpenters and garden workers and the overall administrator Yeto and our kitchen staff. Anyway, it's an amazing team of people who've come together to make this a dream house, which I am just humbled by.
So you say you weren't looking, but what was it that flipped the coin for you?
Was it what flipped the coin for me was knowing that the owner was amenable to a creative solution. That really, really was what got me. And once I knew that the will was there for me to have the freedom to make this into a sacred place, I like to say, then and with his blessing, then I knew that it could be something. So I went forward and started cleaning it up and doing all the remodeling. And he's only visited here 2 or 3 times, and every time he comes, he's just so happy that I'm doing this. Yeah.
And it's so hygge.
It's so hygge. And here we are with lots of candle and firelight, and we're cozy as ever in this sunken living room. And I'm so happy that all of you are here. And it's that your first time to Guatemala, except for a brief moment, right? But it's your first time spending some days in Guatemala, Siobhan, and we're happy that you're here.
We're almost at the end of this episode. In a few seconds, I'll tell you what I picked up and learned from my visit here in Guatemala. But first, let me remind you that this episode is supported in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best deals on hotel rooms, guest houses, and hostels around the world in one simple search. You should really try it out next time you need a roof over your head on a trip. It's called Hotels25.com.
And now, here's Paula's Pickup.
I am so happy that I made some interesting new friends during my stay in Casa Cachique in San Lucas Tolimán at Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. Meeting Alexa, Siobhan, and Andrés was the best thing that had happened to me for a long time. And especially Andrés' ability to talk to everyone and emerge into the small local community impressed me a lot. I want to be like that when I grow up. When we're walking through the town, I can see and hear that he knows so many people, and many people know him and his dog Cachique. A small walk to the market could take a long time because we would end up talking to people all the time. He's clearly not just an American and an outsider. He's one of the locals, and that to me was so inspiring. Obviously it helps that he's fluent in Spanish, but even though I'm not, I think I learned a lot from Andrés. Just a few words in the local language helps, and trying to remember the names of people I meet. So in other words, that was one of the things I picked up and learned from my visit to Guatemala. I put a link in the episode notes and on the radiovagabond.com to the Airbnb. Consider staying here if you're going to Guatemala and spend some time with Andrés and Cachique. And by the way, when I was there, 2 tiny kittens also moved into Casa Cachique. In a few days, it's the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. And for that reason, you'll get a special bonus episode in a few days.
Everyone is looking up in the direction of the Twin Towers. And so I looked up and I saw the hole where the first plane went into. But it wasn't until I started walking a few blocks away that something about that just seemed odd, and I turned around, and that's when I saw the second plane hit.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if there was something inspiring, please share it with a friend. My name is Palabo, and I gotta keep moving. See ya.
Produced by radioguru.co.uk.